Hi, my name is Kailyn Richards. I attend Portsmouth High School in New Hampshire, and I'm a junior. And I'm currently in my first year of our school's 2-year careers in education program. And my long term goal is to become an elementary school teacher. So I wrote this book. It's called A Friend Like Me, and it is suitable for second grade readers. And it deals with 3 different themes. And also to create the images, I used an app on my iPad called Procreate. So it allows you to digitally create the illustrations. So that's how I made those. So this book deals with 3 different themes. The first one is deafness. So on the left, we have Daniel. He's the main character and he's deaf. So at the beginning of the book, it starts with a flashback from when he first found out that he was deaf. And then it flashes forward to the setting, which is his first day of second grade, when he is completely deaf. So I think that deafness is a really important and valuable lesson, especially for children, because I don't think that it's introduced enough into children's literature. And this may be the first time that a child is learning about deafness or hearing about it. So the second theme is empathy. So throughout the book, Daniel also deals with bullying because of his deafness. The readers are able to see how he's treated differently because of his deafness and the different challenges that he goes through. And so when they see how others treat him differently and how others can be mean to him because of that difference that he has, they're able to empathize with him and recognize how he is feeling because of that. And so it's that social emotional aspect of it, so that when a child reads about this and then they can apply it in their real life and see how others might be hurting, and if others are being bullied, they can recognize that and kind of put themselves in others' shoes. So they're exercising that empathy skill. And then the third lesson in this book is impact. So each character impacts Daniel differently. So, for example, the bullies impact him negatively, and the friend that he makes impacts him positively. So readers are able to distinguish between the positive and negative impacts and see how both types of impact result differently and how those change how Daniel is feeling. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to be reading as if there's a real life class in front of me. So I'll ask questions and make comments to try to engage the listeners. Here we go. A Friend Like Me. I, Daniel Davis, was 6 years old when I started to lose my hearing. The sounds around me were getting harder to hear. I didn't know what was happening, so I told my mom. She looked very worried when I told her. "We need to get your ears checked at the doctor," she had said. My mom brought me to the doctor and had her check my ears. Unfortunately, Daniel is dealing with hearing loss. He's going to need to start learning sign language soon, the doctor told me. So does anyone know what sign language is? If you don't, that's okay. You're going to learn so much more about it. If you do, that's great. Someone who is deaf either has trouble hearing the sounds around them or can't hear the sounds at all. The doctor told me that I was going totally deaf, which meant that soon I wouldn't be able to hear anything at all. But there is an upside to all of this. People who are deaf use a super cool way of communicating. This is called sign language. With sign language, people use their hands to create symbols that stand for certain letters and words. When I started learning sign language, I got to learn fun words like cat, tree, and play. So here Daniel is showing us some of the words that he learned when he started learning sign language. Even though I can't hear anything anymore, I have now mastered sign language, and I'm a sign language genius. Now it is 1 year later, and today is my first day of second grade. I'm so nervous. How are the other kids going to react now that I'm deaf? Do you think they'll treat me any differently? I signed to my mom on our way to school. They might be surprised, but I don't think they'll treat you any differently. And if they do, just remember that you have something so special and rare about you, she signed. So here you can see that Daniel and his mom are signing to each other to communicate. After she dropped me off, I walked into school and felt a rush of excitement. I was both nervous and excited for my first day of school. So you guys can imagine what that's like, right? On your first day of school, you feel nervous and excited. Imagine how Daniel's feeling now that he's deaf. He's even more nervous, right? When I got to the classroom, I sat down at my desk labeled Daniel Davis. The other kids around me were talking, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. I could only see their lips moving. So imagine walking into a classroom full of other kids and not even knowing what they're saying. All you see is their lips moving. It's kind of scary, right? So Daniel must be feeling very scared right now. You may be wondering how I can learn in school if I can't hear anything. Well, I have a super awesome lady in my class who signs whatever the teacher says so that I can understand it. She's called an interpreter. Okay, everyone, my teacher said. My interpreter started signing everything that my teacher was saying to the class. So there's the interpreter. She's signing. And there's the teacher. Welcome to second grade. I'm sure you're all pretty nervous for the first day of school. Before we start going over classroom rules, we need to get to know each other, starting with Daniel. Daniel is deaf, she said, so he can't hear what we're saying, but he has his interpreter who signs for him. She pointed to my interpreter, and everyone turned their heads to see her. Signing is a way of communication for people who are deaf, so that they can speak and listen just like we can. They use their hands to create symbols in order to communicate. Isn't that cool? While I watched my interpreter sign what my teacher was saying, I was able to understand every word. I felt so special. I guess it is pretty cool that I can communicate in such a unique way. When it was time for lunch, I grabbed my lunchbox and walked with my class to the cafeteria. I started to feel sad because everyone was talking to each other, but no one was talking to me. It makes sense because they don't know sign language and can't communicate with me. I just wished that I had a friend to talk to. We got to the cafeteria and I sat down at an empty table. I was too scared to sit with the other kids because I knew that I couldn't hear them. I was afraid to be so different from them. So think of something that makes you different from other kids. It makes you kind of sad sometimes, right? That you can't relate to other kids and that you feel kind of left out, right? That's how Daniel's feeling right now. You can tell he's pretty sad. After I started eating my lunch, a group of 3 kids walked up to my table. They were all holding signs in their hands and laughing. One by one, they each held up their signs. When I read them, I quickly felt embarrassed. All of their signs said hurtful and mean things about my deafness. They started laughing and pointing at me. When I looked around the cafeteria, I saw that everyone else was laughing too. I couldn't believe it. So what kind of impact are these bullies having on Daniel? Bad impact, right? A negative impact. And you can see here what that impact is doing to him, right? For the rest of the day, I tried to remember what my mom had told me, that I have something very special about me. But I couldn't help but feel ashamed of what makes me so different from the other kids. Sometimes I just wish that I could hear like everyone else. So does anyone know what ashamed means? So ashamed means that you feel bad, that something that makes you who you are, you feel like it's a bad thing. Do you think that Daniel should feel bad about being deaf? No, right? Of course not. When my mom picked me up from school, she noticed I was sad. "What's wrong, Daniel?" she signed. "Some kids were making fun of me today for being deaf." I explained to her what they did, and she told me that she would tell the principal. Then she gave me a warm hug to cheer me up. The next day at lunchtime, I sat down at the same empty table and opened up my lunchbox. Suddenly, a girl walked up to my table. I was scared that she was going to make fun of me like the other kids did. But she actually sat down at my table. I looked up and saw her signing. She knows sign language? I thought. In sign language, she told me that her name was Evie and that she'd love to be my friend. She explained how her older sister is deaf, so she'd known how to sign for a while. So what do you think? You think Evie is going to be a good friend? Yeah? Every day after that, Evie and I ate lunch together, and we spent our time munching on our food and signing. Other kids noticed us and started sitting with us. They thought it was so awesome that we could communicate in a different language. We even taught the other kids some words in sign language. So you can see that they are having a positive impact, that Evie is having a positive impact on Daniel, and they're encouraging other kids to come and sit with them now. Evie and I also had playdates with their deaf sister, Ada. We swung on the swings and played together. It was so nice to have friends that finally understood me. So there's Ada. Remember what my mom told me on the first day of school? You have something so special and rare about you. You see, we all have special things about us that make us different from one another. Before I met Evie, I thought that because I was deaf, I wasn't normal. But when you think about it, no one is normal. Now I'm proud of my deafness because I know that it makes me different, and knowing sign language is an amazing ability to have. Just because someone is different from you doesn't mean that you should ever hurt their feelings. Sometimes all someone needs is a good friend. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed.